Hello, Jacksonites, and yes, it's finally here. Welcome to the very first episode of Super Kaiju Binge, a epic, long, at least a year and a half long series where I'm going to be reviewing every single monster movie that I own with various guests throughout the entire series. And what better movie to start off this series with King Kong? That was a good idea while it lasted. And of course, joining me is who the fuck else will be joining me for the original King Kong? Jackie Boy on my channel for the first time in ages.
Sonny, I haven't seen you in 100 years, boy. We're here to talk about now my favorite motion pictures, King Kong. Yeah, it's been a while, man. I mean, you've been kind of in and out of YouTube lately, and congrats to over 300 subscribers. You're getting up there.
Thank you.
But yeah, King Kong, the original and the 76 remake are my favorite films, number one. And we're here to talk about it. And God, I don't know how many times have I seen this fucking thing now? Like probably about 6,000 times.
I've only seen this movie 6 times, so take that for what you will.
I beat you by over 1,000.
Yep. So yes, indeed, the original King Kong. I mean, what the hell else could we say that? Well, Jackie Boy's reviewed this movie a couple of times, but what else could we really say about this movie?
Everything Kong related. 69 episodes to be exact.
Giggity. What the hell else could we say about this movie that hasn't been said already?
It's the most influential film of all time.
Well, considering it's me, I think I can spin this a new way for you. So now when we get into this series, let's just pretend that everything that we've said beforehand and every review or video that we've done beforehand just does not exist. I'm aware that my original King...
Batman every few years.
I'm aware that my original King Kong and Son of Kong dual review is pretty successful, but I'm just going to pretend that doesn't exist because, well, partially because I have a new additions to the pros and cons, but also partially because my rating for this movie is kind of going to throw a lot of people for a loop. So, but you know, what is our personal history? Jackie Boy, you can go first.
My personal history is interesting. I first saw the original King Kong probably when I was 5 years old. My uncle had brought over my 2 uncles who had worked in the film business, wanted to get me into it. Brought me 4 movies on VHS. One was, the first 2 was Jaws and Jaws 2, which we watched back to back. That was the first time for me. And then we watched the original King Kong and King Kong Lives. And I always thought King Kong Lives as a kid was like a sequel to the original. So they like recreated the original, but I was young and stupid. But yeah, that was the first time I saw the original on an old VHS. And, you know, over time, it kind of just passed by me. I mean, I knew the Universal Studios attraction that I went to as a kid with the big robot Kong, which was awesome. I knew it with the films. My interest in the film didn't really catch on in Peter Jackson remake when I actually rented the movie at a local video store and watched it again and kind of became really much more fascinated with it. On top of that, I got the DVD eventually, the 3-pack DVD with like It, Son of Kong, and Mighty Joe Young. And I watched a lot of the documentaries and I kept watching and I realized this movie's just really hit me in a place I thought, you know, I've seen it all. I've seen Star Wars, I've seen Lord of the Rings. Those are some of my favorite movies. But Kong, just the anticipation for the Jackson movie along with the original just made me appreciate it so much more. And just seeing all the effort and what it brought to the table for later films and what we have today is all because of this movie. It just makes me love it. The more I watch it, the more I love it. And I've had that same thing kind of hit me with like Ridley Scott's Legend, for example. The more I watch it, the more I fall in love with it. So Kong just does that for me. And because of it, I've done my remake, I've done my show. It's just a very inspirational piece of filmmaking.
Well, my personal history with the original King Kong is I was always aware of it when I was growing up. I think I mentioned before that the 76 Kong, I do believe, was the very first King Kong movie I ever saw. And I saw it not very long before the '05 version. I don't want to get too much into that, but I was always aware that the original first King Kong movie was in black and white, and it was from the early days of cinema. But I never really got around to seeing any footage of it until James Rolfe did his top 10 giant movie monsters video. And of course, at number 2, for some fucking reason, was King Kong. And then 2 years after he did that, he did his 3rd season of Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. And of course, I think it was the 4th or 6th episode of that season was when he did King Kong. And so I got to learn a bit more about that film and, how important it was to the movie industry and especially for the kaiju genre. But I never really got around to seeing it in full until 4 or 5 years later. I went to a flea market in Portland, and I just so happened to find the original King Kong on DVD for like $5. So I was like, you know what? I think I'll pick this up. So of course I did, and I took it home, and I sat down and I watched the original King Kong. Kind of was not really blown away by it. Sorry, I'm just being honest.
You could probably say it's like you can see the influence of what it left, but I can see from like a younger generation how it doesn't click as much as previous ones do.
Well, it's not that I was young when I watched it was why it didn't click with me. I'd seen the original Godzilla long before the original Kong, and I like that movie. I'd seen Them. I love that movie. I'd seen Creature from the Black Lagoon. I love that film too. I liked older movies at that time. I still do, but just for some reason, it may have also been due to the fact that I was very well exposed to the 2005 King Kong movie. So that kind of like your reaction to Mighty Joe '98 and seeing the original Mighty Joe.
Yeah, I think you're right about that because you were obviously more exposed to the Jackson remake. And the Jackson remake is great. I mean, I have my issues with it, but it is very much almost a shot-for-shot colored widescreen tribute to the original, so it's why you could probably click with it more because it's more advanced.
That's part of it, yes, but also I wasn't as invested in the film as I thought and / hoped that I would be. So then I kind of just let it sit. A few years later, I got rid of that disc. I actually gave it to my brother as a birthday present. But then I bought the double feature because James Rolfe once again got me interested in Kong when he mentioned Son of Kong. And I was like, you know what? I really want to see Son of Kong. I'll get to that tomorrow, or not tomorrow, in a couple days when we get to Son of Kong. But I bought a double bill that had the original King Kong and Son of Kong. And I watched both movies back to back. One movie one day, and then the next day was the second film. And still, once again, the movie did not really click with me. So I watched it again a couple years later, and then I watched it when I first did my original King Kong review. I think I watched it twice at that point. And then a few days ago, I rewatched the original King Kong yet again. And I gotta say, still, while I acknowledge that the movie, objectively, it is a very, very good movie. So much of today's cinema, and especially the monster movie genre, owes so much to this movie. And it influenced countless people in Hollywood and all throughout the world. And also, if it wasn't for Kong, we wouldn't have Godzilla. But I still gotta say, this is really not one of my favorite monster movies. It's not quite my taste. It's not quite my pace. It's just, I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to rip off James Rolfe, and I've said this before, I kind of do just view the original King Kong as the Citizen Kane of monster movies. In many ways it is. Like how Citizen Kane influenced so much in cinema today, and it pioneering a lot of filmmaking techniques that all of Hollywood takes advantage of now. With Kong, like I said, there's many things that it pioneered. There's a lot of special effects it pioneered, and a lot of filmmaking techniques that pioneered for future monster movies to take advantage of. And I just view the original King Kong as an academic piece. It's something to be studied and not necessarily to be enjoyed. The more that I try to enjoy it, the kind of less that I do enjoy it. But that's not to say that I don't. There are things about it that I like. I'm just not nearly as enthusiastic about it as many, many, many other people are. And I respect those who are, but I'm definitely in the minority when I say it's not as, I don't think it's as good as everyone else says that it is. But before we talk about that, anything else you want to add before we get into the plot?
Two things. One, to quote an older Jack Driscoll from Big Lebowski, yeah, well, that's like, your opinion, man. And two, you misspelled my name in the title. It's BIHJCK.
Oops. Well, I'll fix that in post. Or maybe I'll just leave it in there for shits and giggles.
Anyway.
Well, my bad. I'll fix that. Alrighty, so the plot. In New York Harbor in 1932, does it take place in 1932?
Yes, it does. A lot of people think 1933, but that's only because the movie was released in 33, whereas the Jackson remake, it actually takes place in 33, although the musical takes place in 1931.
Okay, so yeah, filmmaker Carl Denham, played by the awesome Robert Armstrong, known for wildlife films and remote and exotic locations, charters Captain Engelhorn's ship, played by... No.
Oh, what's his name? Damn it.
No, it's not.
God. Oh, man.
Frank Riker, or Reicher, however.
Frank Riker. Yeah, Frank Reacher.
Reacher, okay. Yeah, played by Frank Reacher, the venture for his new project. However, he cannot secure an actress for a female role he has been reluctant to disclose. In searching in the streets of New York City, he finds Ann Darrow and promises her the adventure of a lifetime. Ann Darrow being played, I say lightly, by Fay Wray.
Actress Fay Wray.
The crew boards the Venture and sets off, during which the ship's first mate, Jack Driscoll, played by Bruce Cabot, falls in love with Anne. Right out of butt the fuck nowhere.
I've only known you for 5 minutes, but unless a giant monkey comes around, I think you're the one.
Denham reveals to the crew that their destination is, in fact, an uncharted territory known as Skull Island, of which he has come to knowledge from a Norwegian ship captain who saved some natives off the island from a canoe, although they died before reaching land. He alludes to a monstrous creature named Kong, rumored to dwell on the island. The crew arrives and anchor offshore, and they encounter a native village. Many of these natives were not actually black, fun fact, separated from the rest of the island by an ancient stone wall with an enormous wooden gate. They witness a group...
Which, by the way, that set was originally used in other films prior, like King of Kings, and actually they burnt it down in Gone with the Wind.
Huh. They witness a group of natives preparing to presumably sacrifice a young woman termed the Bride of Kong, quote-unquote, by confining her on the other side of the wall. The intruders are spotted, and the native chief stops the ceremony. When he sees Anne, he offers to trade 6 of his tribal women for the golden woman, quote unquote. They rebuff him and return to the venture. But that night, the natives kidnap Anne from the ship and take her through the wall gate into an altar where she is offered to King Kong, an enormous gorilla-like creature. Kong carries a terrified Anne into the wilderness as Denham. Oh, and from this point on, all she does until the end of the movie is whimper and scream.
Yeah, just keep screaming, bitch. Maybe he'll finally go away.
More on that later. As Jack, Denham, and some volunteers enter the jungle in hopes of rescuing her, they are ambushed by another giant creature, being a Stegosaurus, which, of course, on Skull Island, dinosaurs do still exist, which they manage to defeat after gassing it and shooting it. After facing a carnivorous brontosaur, which is incredibly scientifically inaccurate, and
defending its territory, never necessarily ate them.
As well as Kong himself on a log bridge where they fall into the missing spider pit scene, which should have been left in the movie. Jack and Denham are the only survivors. A T-Rex attacks Anne and Kong. However, Kong kills it in the ensuing fight, which is easily the best part of the film. Meanwhile, Jack...
one of the best finishers of all time.
Jack continues to follow them while Denham returns to the village for more men. Upon arriving in Kong's lair, Anne is menaced by a snake-like elasmosaur, which Kong also kills. And while Kong is distracted killing a pteranodon they tried to fly away with Anne, Jack reaches her and they climb down a vine dangling from a cliff ledge. When Kong notices...
They totally stun people.
Huh?
They are totally stun people.
Yes.
In fact, Jack's stunt double is bald.
Is what?
He's bald.
I never noticed that, but I definitely could tell that they were stunt people. Yeah. When Kong notices this and starts trying to pull them back up, the two fall unharmed some fucking how, even though they fall into the shallowest part of the river. They run to the jungle and back to the village where Denham, Engelhorn, and the surviving crewmen are waiting. Kong, in pursuit, breaks open the gate despite the huge beam closing it, and both the crew and the natives try to push it closed. And he relentlessly rampages through the village, killing many in the process. On shore, Denham, now determined to bring Kong back alive, knocks him unconscious with a gas bomb. Shackled in chains, Kong is taken to New York and presented to a Broadway theater audience as King Kong, the eighth wonder of the world. Anne and Jack are brought on stage to join him, surrounded by a group of photographers, and Kong, believing that the ensuing flash photography is an attack, breaks loose and goes on a rampage throughout New York City. Anne is whisked away to a hotel room on a high floor, but Kong, scaling this hotel, soon finds her, and his hand smashes through the hotel room window, shoving Jack aside somehow, and abducts Anne again. Yeah, pretty much. Kong destroys... Kong rampages through the city as Anne screams in his grip, and he wrecks a crowded elevator train and then climbs the Empire State Building. At its very top, he is attacked by 4 airplanes. Kong destroys one, but finally succumbs to their gunfire. He gazes at Anne one last time before falling and splattering to his death. Jack takes an elevator to the top of the building and reunites with Anne. Denham arrives and pushes through a crowd surrounding Kong's corpse in the street, and when a policeman remarks that the planes got him, Denham tells him, "No, it wasn't the airplanes.
Oh, no. It wasn't the airplanes.
It was beauty.
It was beauty.
Killed the beast." So, Jackie boy, how about this plot?
It is a mixed bag of awesomeness. Adventurous, romantic, just classy Hollywood. And that's one of the reasons I love it so much. It's not like today's movies where everything has to be PC and, The girl is independent all the goddamn time. It's just classic action adventure filmmaking, but it takes from a lot of influence. A lot of the script was based on real life events from the creators, Cooper, Schoedsack, and Schoedsack's wife, Ruth Rose. In fact, Denham, Jack, and Anne are based on those three entirely back when they were exploring jungles in Africa, making silent films like Chang and Grass. So there's a lot of influence there. On top of that, Cooper's inspiration to bring Kong to New York was based on a guy who actually brought a Komodo dragon from the islands, and it died in civilization. So a lot of it just kind of came together at the right moment and really made it its own sort of essentially a fairy tale. Like, Kong has now become such a staple of cinema. It's pretty much a cinema version of like a Grimm's fairy tale. It's up there with Snow White and all those, just that classic story, sort of, in a way. So in my opinion, it still holds up to this day as one of the best stories ever conceived by humankind.
Well, my opinion on the film story, trying to look past the fact that nowadays it does feel very cliche and generic, especially for its time. Yes, I do agree. It's classic Hollywood action adventure forced romance. It feels very timeless. It feels very classic. Even though it still does feel very 1930s, this feels like the epitome of the pre-era golden days of Hollywood. It just feels very classic. It feels very good Hollywood. It feels like everybody was giving a 110% effort into making this as big and epic in scale as possible. And it shows, and it's impressive, and it is entertaining.
Fun fact, too, it's like the story is so classic, and we bring that up, this film's a classic. Turner Classic Movies, whenever they show King Kong, is when they actually get their highest ratings.
Fair enough. So yeah, nothing really bad to say about the plot. I do sort of kind of think it's a little simple. It's just like, set up, go to the island, fight the monsters, come back from the island, animal fights humans, animal dies. But it was early in this genre, so it's a little excusable. And I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing, but I just will say I do think the plot is just a tad simple, but it's not bad at all.
The best way to describe the plot very quickly is Beauty and the Beast meets The Lost World.
Yes. And for those of you who are going to wonder, no, I have never seen the 1925 The Lost World film. I actually haven't seen any of the Lost World films. None of them really look all that interesting to me, if I'm being honest. So minus Jurassic Park, yes. But I would definitely agree. It's Beauty and the Beast mixed with The Lost World. That's a very good mix. So what are your pros and cons? Let's start with your pros, Jackie boy.
Pro number one thing I will say is the way Kong is presented. Something I haven't really discussed in my other reviews is one thing that all the later Kong films really fail to do. And what I find is really keep Kong a terrifying, monstrous threat. I find later incarnations, even the 1976 remake, they make him too sympathetic. One thing I really enjoy about the original Kong is that they keep him threatening, they keep him scary. That's the thing, they keep him scary and terrifying until the last scene. The whole time you are rooting for these heroes to win. You want them to save the girl from the evil the dragon, essentially. You don't give a shit about the dragon. The dragon's a creature that needs to be slain. Again, the classic fairy tale motif. But what makes it just so much more of a powerful film is the fact that once you start to realize at the end when he's getting bullets in him like crazy, And he's like, at that point, even like the planes, they're trying to shoot him, and they don't give a fuck about Anne. Even though wait, don't fucking shoot Anne. Kong's there trying to protect her, and you're like, oh my god, he actually has a heart. And then you realize, wait, but you were wrong. And then you feel bad when it's too late, and that's what makes the film great. You don't feel bad for him right away. You actually feel bad when the timing is just so badly off that you're too late to save him. And it really gets you thinking. Like, that's one of the things I love. It makes you think about, did we just really ruin something that we should have thought about in the beginning? So later incarnations just failed to do that, and I want to see that again with Kong. And that's why the original is so strong. His character is just a vicious, monstrous beast. And you're just scared. You're just terrified of him. You're like, get back the hell away.
Fair enough. Continue.
What's my first pro? I don't know what your first pro is.
No, go through yours first. Then I'll go through mine.
Pro number 2, the whole way the film was presented, not only, well, I'll get to the effects in a sec, but mostly the sound and music, because what's also a great achievement about this film is that this was at the time when sound movies were in their infancy. Prior to Kong, the first real on-screen horror film was the original Dracula with Bela Lugosi. It really got sound movies into the mainstream. I mean, there were sound movies before that, but in terms of films that actually kind of predate Kong and actually bring in more of technical aspects, Dracula, Murders of the Rue Morgue, which actually predates Kong with a gorilla grabbing a girl and taking him to the top of a building, it's all there. And the idea that not only do the filmmakers say, we're not only going to make this a full-on sound picture with dinosaurs roaring and jungles, birds chirping, and Kong roaring, which is a lion's roar played backwards at half speed, but also musical scores, because Max Steiner, of the Golden Age, he was the John Williams of that time. He not only perfected film scores, he started it. The original Kong score was the first time a film had an original soundtrack attached to it. There was no such thing as, we're going to create music for a film. Back then, you'd have to use classical music, like Dracula used Swan Lake. And so this film provided itself what we have today in terms of scores. No Kong 33 score means no original score to no Star Wars theme, no Back to the Future theme, no Avengers theme, no Batman theme. Again, so it's not just filmmaking, it's music owes a lot to this film as well. So just the sound and everything, it all came together at the right time, which brings me to pro number 3, the visual effects. Yes, they're pretty outdated by today's standards. You have scenes that don't mesh too well, not much compositing, but again, earliest filmmaking at the time, and it was such a groundbreaker to get this done. I mean, early on, before the advancements of stop motion, before Cooper knew about Willis O'Brien, he wanted to shoot the film with a real gorilla, take him to the islands of Komodo and have him fight real Komodo dragons on miniature sets and film it at slow motion.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, PETA would have a field day with that. It's not that would have looked like Irwin Allen's Lost World with lizards and shit. So basically, there were struggles to figure out how to visualize this gorilla, and everybody told him put a man in a suit, and man in suits just weren't working at that time. So Willis O'Brien, at the time Cooper was working at RKO, Willis O'Brien was having struggles with a film called Creation, which is a semi-sequel to The Lost World. Think Titanic meets Land That Time Forgot, essentially. Even with a Billy Zane-esque bad guy, which is great. So, to the point,
cool.
The film was over budget and wasn't even getting ready to film. So Cooper stepped in and said, hey, we can use this technology, but let's just scrap the film you're working on and make my gorilla movie instead. So that's what they did. And it just, again, came at the right time and really brought everything to the table. And it inspired, Ray Harryhausen at the time, who saw the original film as a kid, went on to work with O'Brien, and then his films were inspired, all filmmakers stayed. George Lucas, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, they all owe, and Peter Jackson all owe to Harryhausen. So it's a big snowball that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So the no visual effects in King Kong means none of the amazing visual effects today. In fact, I'll give one to you, Nick. No King Kong, no Avatar. No King Kong, no Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Fully
no
aware.
King Kong, no Star Wars.
Fully aware.
So that's pro number 3. Pro number 4, I find the editing is pretty quick. The pacing is very quick and easy to follow, and it mostly comes down to the fact that the movie actually did originally have a really off pace, and Cooper wanted to essentially really build up the tension in the beginning. This is before Jaws. This really also brought in the idea that you don't see the monster until halfway through the film. And this is before Jaws. Jaws dealt with that because the damn fucking shark wouldn't freaking work. So, but with now, this was a motif that was happening even back then, that they had to build up this tension to get people invested and want to see what the hell is there. So the pacing went really well. In fact, Cooper, honestly, he took out a lot of scenes that either were never animated, were animated but cut. One being the spider pit scene, but others include dinosaur chases with a Styracosaur. There was even a scene that was storyboarded but never animated, where Kong fights 3 Triceratops in a tar pit. That was supposed to go in between, I believe, the Stegosaur and the swamp scene. Again, it was taken out for time. They were even going to use some of the creation test footage to save money, but again, that footage never got used. So, yeah, the pacing was all there. But then, in the third act, Cooper felt the third act was a little too short. So that whole train scene was actually a pickup shoot that they did while they were editing the movie, and they pretty much set up a whole train set and just had O'Brien animate a new sequence. So that was pretty much also the first pickup shot, essentially, or reshoot. So again, the editing is just so spot on. And I even remember as a kid, this is sort of a Mandela effect thing here, but I had a Mandela effect with the original where when Kong falls, it's just one straight shot. But I remember it always intercut with a shot of a plane kind of just passing by camera. And it's weird, I talked to other people, and apparently people still had that same Mandela effect. It's the same thing with Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, where Godzilla picks up the girl. I actually remember that. And the Mandela effect really kind of fucked that up, where he does it to that. What? What the hell? So, yeah, editing, spot on. Pro number 5, just the impact. The impact this film left. It's just nothing. We owe a lot to this film for what we have now. I think we really take the technology and the way films are made for granted, because we figured, they can just make that, no problem. It's not like a terrible virus is going to destroy the film industry as we know it.
Don't even go there. Not on my channel.
Yeah, to the point. It just really, we really have to be grateful for a film like this. If you were to go back in time and tell them not to make this movie, we wouldn't have the films we have now. So we just owe a lot of thanks to Kong, because it really just pioneered what is possible. I always point out that James Rolfe, who I worked with a few times, was the pioneer of not only the current gaming culture we have now, but also of YouTube, of what can be done with YouTube and content and how to make videos. Kong, if James is like the Kong for YouTube.
Who's the Godzilla?
Kong just really pushed the boundaries of what was possible. And to this day, we are still pushing those boundaries of what's possible. Even though we have better technology to make it easier and pioneer, there still are challenges that filmmakers face in terms of how to create shots, how to do sound design, and just all goes back to Kong. Even for me, like remaking my own, I was just thinking, what would have the original filmmakers done?
Who's the Godzilla of YouTube? JonTron?
It's really hard to decide. I think, honestly, James was the first, I would say. But I think over time, you, Kaiju Network, D-Man 1954, Goji Fan 93, they're the ones who really, I think, pioneered the Godzilla community altogether. They really kind of made it huge now. So, those are my pros.
Alrighty. So, let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 6 pros. Pro number 1, yes, is Kong himself. Now, this character-wise, this might be my least favorite version of King Kong, I'll admit. But at least, you start good, so the only way that you can go is up from here. Presented just as a giant monster, he is pulled off very well. He's very threatening. He's very intimidating. He's very monstrous. He's very kind of creepy, especially when he starts disrobing Anne.
The one thing I will say is the animatronic head. Why does it look like Donkey Kong?
Yeah, the animatronic head looks a little ridiculous, but whatever. So yeah, as a giant monster, Kong does work very well. He's a very basic giant monster, but there's nothing wrong with that, especially for this time. He's got great strength, and he's huge, so who cares? He
kind of does predate the Hulk, where his rage is what gives him his strength in a way.
A little bit, yeah. Not really much to say about Kong. He's a good fighter. He's fun to watch. His rampages throughout the Skull Island in New York and fighting the T-Rex are all fun to watch, but I'll get to that in a minute. Pro number 2 is the music by Max Steiner. Is that who did it?
Yeah, Max Steiner.
The music score for this movie is incredible, especially for this time. It's a full-on soundtrack and sound design for an early talkie movie. I was used to watching movies around this time. I'm used to things like Dracula. That's one of my biggest problems with Dracula is the lack of a musical score. It just makes it feel very soulless and stuffy and pretentious. There's a
special edition of Dracula that actually has a score to it.
I'm fully aware. Yes, same for Frankenstein, I'm guessing too. But this movie's score is absolutely incredible. Everybody knows the original King Kong theme, the one that plays in the opening credits. There's so many tracks throughout this movie that everybody remembers, like the one that they have playing for when they find Skull Island, the opening theme, the theme when Kong is introduced in New York, and, of course, the ending theme when Kong dies. Everybody remembers this movie soundtrack, and it's incredible. Especially for its time, and Max Steiner should have won an Oscar if those things were around at the time.
Max Steiner actually later on went to compose 2 of the greatest soundtracks at that time as well. He ended up composing the score to not only Gone with the Wind, but
Casablanca. Yeah, Casablanca. Well, then there you go.
Great movie, by the way.
Pro number 3 is Carl Denham and Captain Engelhorn. I'll actually talk about Captain Engelhorn first. I actually think he's slightly better in Son of Kong, but here he's great. He's not like the douchebag that is Captain Engelhorn in Kong 05. Thank God. Now that I think about it, that's actually one of my very few problems with Kong 05, but that's way later down the road.
Actually, interesting fact about Engelhorn reason there's that tension between Denham and Engelhorn in the Peter Jackson remake was because Engelhorn is actually German. And in 1933, certain things happened, and so not many people trusted the Germans. So even in a deleted scene, Denham is looking over at the captain's cabin with Jack, and he says, Engelhorn's in on it. That stinking German. You know, he was even trying to pretty much accuse him of saying the Nazis want Skull Island.
Which actually would have been nice sequel bait if Peter Jackson wasn't a fucking troll. Anyway, so yeah, Captain Engelhorn in this movie is really good. He's really witty. He's really sly. He's kind of a little bit of a smartass, but in a fun way. And he has very good chemistry with Denham, of course, played by Robert Armstrong. Now, once again, I do think that Denham is slightly better in Son of Kong, but here Robert Armstrong plays the character very, very, very well. He's very enthusiastic. He's very ambitious. He's very loud-spoken. He's very brass, but he's also not a douchebag like some scripted versions of Carl Denham was made out to be, like a douchebag, uncaring piece of shit, kind of like in your remake.
Well, that's the thing. Everybody loves that part of the movie. Like, I had so many people at screenings be like, just die, just die, just die. Right? I was just kept teasing him, which is great. Actually, it's funny too with Denham. He actually was also, I think, him and Groucho Marx were the brainchilds of the classic stereotypical filmmaker of the 1930s. Like, yeah, say I'm going to make a motion picture. It's going to be the greatest thing in the world. See, you're going to be a star. You know, like I think like because of Denham's like voice in that, you know, there's lines in this movie where he's like, I go out to make a swell picture, and the critics and the executives all say, if this picture had love interest, it would gross twice as much. Like, he kind of started that stereotypical 1930s Hollywood voice, and it's just great.
Yeah, it is.
Where that came from.
And he's very fun to watch in this movie. Now, again, his character wouldn't be nearly as good if they made him a douchebag. Because while he wants to get his movie made, the second that Anne is kidnapped, he's all gung-ho, assholes and elbows, saying, okay, nope, we got to go get her back. We got to go get her back. She's in danger. It's time to get her back. Not quite as much as Jack for some fucking reason, because obviously that for some fucking reason he loves Anne, but you know, it's similar. He shows caring and concern, which is admirable for his character. He's not so blinded by riches and ambition that he just doesn't really care about, oh my God, somebody that I know and I kind of care about is kidnapped, or he's more like, oh my God, my plans are ruined. This is so inconvenient. So he's not like that character. Here he's very, I don't want to say he's humble, but he's definitely down to earth still.
The movie actually does have sort of a love triangle tension, because before it was pretty much a given that Anne would always go for Jack, in the original, you could tell she was also kind of swaying towards Denham a bit. You know, like you can see that a little bit, that there is that tension.
I don't really take that as romantic tension. I just think that she's very grateful to Denham that he was able to give her work in a time where she couldn't really find any. So I don't really think it's romantic. I just think it's her just being very grateful.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like sort of a mentor-teacher kind of
yeah, you could say that.
Relationship. So when like she ends up going missing, it's like, I'm gonna go get my friend back. You know?
Exactly. Let's see. Pro number, 4 is the T-Rex fight. This is kind of separate from another pro that I have, but the T-Rex fight is fucking awesome. It's a little short.
My God, one of the greatest monster fights, action scenes in cinema.
Agreed, yes. It's a little short, but for its time, it's very thrilling, and it's very exciting, and it's very entertaining. It's the quintessential Apex Predator versus Apex Predator type fight, and it's very entertaining. It's very animalistic, and it's very vicious, But at that same time, I learned this when I did my audio commentary for this movie with Jackie Boy, is that apparently Willis O'Brien was a professional boxer, and he incorporated boxing like hand-to-hand combat into Kong's fighting style. And as I watch it with a martial artist analytical mind, I can see that. There is some real life hand-to-hand combat in the way that Kong fights. He likes his hooks when he fights the T-Rex.
He likes uppercuts too. Like he's literally like Mike Tyson and Mike Tyson's Punch Out. The movie that scene also has some great animation moments from O'Brien. Like I love bits like with the T-Rex when he like enters the scene, he just quickly kind of scratches his neck. When he gets up and he's wagging his tail, which is something that Harryhausen kept up, and even down to just Kong, just like he hears Anne in the distance, and he's like literally looking at Jack like, "I'll be back for you, but right now I gotta go save the bitch." And he like goes in like he comes in like Superman, like "Here I come to save the day," and it's just that kind of feeling of kick his ass.
Probably my favorite.
At the time this was their Jurassic Park of the Golden Age.
Probably my favorite moment of the whole fight is when Kong full-on suplexes the T-Rex over his shoulder. I was like, okay, that's cool.
Over, right?
Huh?
That's when he flips him over, right?
Yeah, like throws him over his shoulder. I was like, okay, that's cool.
That's like a John Cena moment. Like, watch out! Oh, it's like a wrestling match.
Mm-hmm. The T-Rex fight, it's very entertaining, and it's the quintessential prototype monster battle. This was doing it before Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, before Godzilla raids again, before even King Kong versus Godzilla. This was the very first monster fight in the first big monster fight in cinema history, and it's fucking awesome. Pro number 5 is the rest of the monster action. Usually this is just Kong, but like Kong fights 2 more animals, and then he goes on kind of 2, but I say sort of 3 rampages.
He fights the Elasmosaur and the Pteranodon.
And he shows up. First of all, his big entrance when he's like pulling aside all the trees is a great reveal. It definitely shows off the size, mass, and scale and spectacle of Kong. Like he just yanks apart all these trees and he starts roaring and beating his chest. It's great.
And actually, in a little behind-the-scenes fact, they had apparently animated that scene, from what I heard, 20 times. Cooper picked the first one. He literally was like, I don't like it. They did it 20 times. He's like, actually, I like it.
If I was one of the animators, I would have slapped him. I was like, bitch, you know how long this shit takes?
That's it. Well, I mean, remember, 1 second of film back then takes 150 hours to animate.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Well, that's not nearly as bad as Stanley Kubrick with The Shining reshooting the when Jack Nicholson chops the door down 157 times, and they just went with like the second take, I believe.
Oh my god.
If I was Jack, I would have taken that damn axe to Kubrick.
You know, Kubrick, you make me want to kill you.
Yeah, that's Stanley Shitbrick for you. But moving on. So, yeah, the monster action is very entertaining. Watching Kong go on his rampage throughout New York City. And the actually, probably my favorite rampage is when Kong is going through the village on Skull Island. I think that'd be my favorite of his rampages. My favorite.
That's great. In the Legend of King Kong remake that Universal was going to do in 75, he was actually supposed to burn the whole thing down.
Damn. My favorite fight is, of course, the Kong versus Rex fight, but the one with the Elasmosaur is pretty interesting, too, because it's the first time we see a monster go up against something that's very snake-like. The only one I kind of don't care for is the one where he fights a Pteranodon. It's just kind of really short, and it's not really focused on. Scared the shit out of me.
Also, the Pteranodon, for some reason, the Pteranodon just looks like a big fucking butterfly. just like a flapping butterfly, like a cute little butterfly, not like Mothra, but it was like, literally when it's flapping its wings trying to get in, it's like, oh, a butterfly! It looks terrible. I'm sorry,
It does.
I love that pteranodon, but man, it flops around like a butterfly. And eventually it's like flopping around like a dead fish in the water.
Yeah, the Kong versus Pteranodon fight I don't really care for. I think that's probably the worst animated segment in the whole movie because like Jackie Boy says, it doesn't really look like a Pteranodon. It looks like a butterfly. So, do you need to take a shit? Anyway, so yeah, the overall, the monster action is pretty fun. It's very 1930s, and it's very kind of prototypical. Because that is one thing I'll say about the effects. Or actually, I may as well just go into the effects right now. Pro number 6 is...
What the hell?
That's the third time you've shit yourself walking in the goddamn door.
I farted right before I got here, which means it's 4 times.
Pro number 6 is that's your reaction watching Colin peel Anne's clothes away.
Pro number 6 is the special effects are very, very good. Especially, cannot stress this enough for the time. There's a lot of double exposure shots that weren't seen before. There's a lot of combining different pieces of footage to make one scene. Like you'll have a piece of footage that has Anne sitting in the tree in the foreground, and then you'll have the stop motion animation footage in the background. They combine that to make it appear as one.
And this was before blue screen or green screen.
They had to do all this shit by hand and splice it all together painstakingly and time consuming. One at a time. And
screen projection.
That too. And of course the stop motion
is now, I was going to say, is actually used even now in The Mandalorian. They use rear screen projection.
Oh, that's cool. And of course, there's the very famous stop motion animation done by special effects pioneer Willis O'Brien, who in many ways was the A.G. Tsuburaya of America. The stop motion animation is very good. It's very well animated. For the most part, it's pretty smooth. There's some areas where the stop motion animation looks a little glitchy or
wonky.
A little wonky, and it looks just there are a couple segments that are kind of poorly animated. Probably the worst of the whole film is the Pteranodon fight. It just looks a little rushed and a little just poor, if I'm being honest.
My guess is because the Pteranodon was on wires and everything, it was just a pain in the ass. They're like, fuck it, get it done as quick as you can.
Yeah, it just... I will. It's just not that good, but I'd say it's easily like a 75 to 80% of the time in this movie. The stop motion animation looks really good. It looks crude. Maybe that's the word I was looking for. It looks very crude, but it's understandable because this was the first time that something like this was done before. And also the various animatronics that they had throughout this movie also look very good. The animatronic Kong head when Kong is putting people in his mouth. That looks very good. Looks very evil and creepy and spooky.
He's like,
yeah, especially with his really wide eyes on his elongating mouth. It just looks really spooky. And the one effect that is done both in here and in Son of Kong. In both cases, it's really impressive. They combine the use of the animatronic hand and the stop motion model of Kong. Here, it's when Kong is holding Anne and creepily undressing him. Her. It looks...
That's Ray Faye. That's Ray Faye and Queen Kong.
It looks very impressive. You can clearly, at least I can clearly tell what they were doing, but still it looked really good. So overall, the special effects are phenomenal for their time, and a lot of them still do hold up to this day. But like I said, there's a couple moments that don't, but I'd still say it's a good 75 to 80% of the time. The special effects are very, very, very solid. And this movie should have.
When it comes to Willis O'Brien, very quickly, if you go watch Kong Skull Island, when John Goodman and his buddy or whatever go to the senator's office, the secretary and the senator are named Senator Willis and Secretary O'Brien.
Oh, I never saw that. Then I've only seen Kong Skull Island 3 times. So I'll have to rectify that. That's all my pros. You got any cons?
Cons?
Or Kongs?
It's really hard to find things you don't like in one of your favorite films. Yes, this one con I have is, yes, this film is a product of its time, of the golden age. It's a pioneering film. But, yeah, there's some things in terms of characters I'm not a fan of because they're either annoying or bland as hell. For one thing, con number one, Jack Driscoll.
Yeah, let's just both talk about Jack, because I'm pretty sure we have the same, at least the first 2 cons.
Hero ever.
Yeah, Jack Driscoll is con number 1 for me. He's so boring.
At least the 96 draft had him have something interesting, making him a World War I fighter pilot. You know, at least they had something interesting. And on top of that, Bruce Cabot, he tried, but this is where you need somebody like a Errol Flynn or a John Wayne. You know, a heroic character of that time to really get the audience invested in him. Here it's just, early Kong heroes are just terrible. They are just not interesting. They're boring. They're bland. They're drunk half the time. No, don't go out like David Carradine, Nick.
David Carradine was found strangled.
I don't remember.
Due to autoerotic asphyxiation.
Was it him or was it Nick Nolte who shot himself? Or I don't even remember.
Nick Nolte's still alive.
Oh, well, who's the one? I swear there was an actor who shot himself. Anyway, yeah, Jack Driscoll sucks.
Yeah, he does. He's very bland. He's very boring. All of his acting is completely wooden. The only thing that's more wooden is the trees on Skull Island themselves. Or the wall that keeps Kong in Skull Island.
To be fair, he's better than Paul Rudd in Halloween 666.
No, I'd still say he's even worse than that. And that's not the title.
Tommy sucked. Tommy was fucking terrible.
Anyway, so, yeah, Bruce Cabot, he's miscast. His acting is bad. All of his dialogue is very wooden and garbage. And when he reveals that he loves Anne, the dialogue is so corny and it's forced, and it just comes out of nowhere. Like, at no point throughout the film does he display any kind of romantic emotions or feelings for Anne. It just kind of seems like it comes right out of butt the fuck nowhere. Oh, I'd be afraid if something happened to you because I guess I love you.
Let's be honest, all the sailors wanted to nail her and he just had first dibs.
Con number 2.
Actually, my second con that I have. This movie can be a little sensitive for newcomers. Not only is there a couple of racist sort of lines, like, okay, the one I love is mostly played for laughs of how outdated it is, and that's where Charlie goes, "Look, sir, he's beat by your neck, crazy black man, baby." Okay,
that's funny.
It's racist, but it's funny. And on top of that, Charlie, stereotypical as hell Asian guy,
Yeah.
Like, this guy fits into, like, South Park, for God's sakes. Like, the freaking, the guy who runs City Walk in South Park. The natives I can get past, but you come across, I think Nostalgia Critic said it best, you come across more realistic natives in Gilligan's Island.
Probably.
And this movie suffers from, unfortunately, Jack Driscoll being a total sexist asshole.
Yeah, he is.
Like, okay, I get the whole women being bad luck on ships thing, because that shit's been going on since Pirates of the Caribbean. They're still doing that shit, even in the first Pirates movie, but here it's just unforgivable. Like, the one line I'm like, dude, you're a dick, is when he says, you're alright, but women just can't help being a mother. Made that way, I guess.
Well, you know what? Okay, I don't really call those flaws because that's just how things were in the 30s. And I think if you were to really hold that against the movie, you're kind of missing the forest for the trees. Watching it...
That's the same argument I do have with Song of the South.
Granted, yes, if you want to, like, see it, like, pointed out, sure, go right ahead, but don't count it as a flaw. That's just how things were at the time. Is it jarring and surprising to watch it nowadays? Yeah. But just keep in mind, that's how it was at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like cinema sins. It's a cinema sin. It's not even a flaw. It's a cinema sin. It's just, crazy black guy here. That's racist. Ding!
Douche!
I don't count cinema sins as criticism. I count it as utter shit-picking.
Yes. Agree with that. And Jordan Vogt Roberts calling out Cinema Sins for their bullshit when they did Kong Skull Island was priceless.
I mean, talk about Kong Skull Island quickly. The only flaws I have was what my dad was saying, because my dad saw the movie and he's a Vietnam veteran, and he only had two flaws. One, he was saying, why didn't they bring missiles on the helicopters? And I had to explain it was a survey job. They didn't know there was giant monsters. But the part that gets me is when they're in the graveyard and Sam Jackson set up the 50K. My dad spit out his beer and he said, they were carrying that the whole fucking time? Like, what's the deal? What's the deal? He said, those things are heavy as hell to carry in that kind of terrain. There's no way they were able to carry that all the way through.
Yeah, 50 cal M60 unloaded weighs 30 pounds. Add that onto the shit ton of other gear that they wear, just like as a standard utility carry out. It's easily like another 50 pounds plus a 30-pound gun plus the 50 pounds of ammo barest minimum for a 50 cal. Like, yo. Whatever. That's neither here nor there. So my con number 2. Fay Wray. She sucks. All of her facial expressions and her dialogue and her acting is so bad. All of her dialogue is corny and flatly and wooden delivered. Her facial expressions are just deadpan. No emotion whatsoever. Completely deadpan. Completely I don't give a fuck. She honestly looks stoned the entire time.
Like Carrie Fisher, the holiday special.
And her dialogue is corny, and also when she's not talking, she's also annoying because literally, barest minimum, 2/3 of her dialogue in this movie is her whimpering and screaming. She only says when she's captured by Kong and when she's brought back to the village, she only has one line. I think it's like, "Oh, Jack, I'm so tired." At the very end of the chase.
This is what she says. She says, "Oh, Jack," that's it. And then when they're in New York, of course we have to help when they save the show. And do you think we'll really make a lot of money? And then there was that horrible dream. It's like being back alive again.
That's literally all the dialogue that she has after the first act. And it's all...
I think, like, the first half before Kong, she is, okay, her acting's not the best, that's the times, but she's tolerable. Second act is where she becomes unbearable.
I think she's unbearable the entire time.
If I was part of that rescue mission, I'd be like, the more she screams, the more I want to turn back and say, fuck this.
Yeah. Fay Wray's just a bad actress. I'm sorry. All of her dialogue sucks. Her facial expressions are completely deadpan. Her acting is completely wooden. And her character is about as flat as a plateau in The Lost World. She's easily the worst thing about this movie, and she's the biggest thing why I don't come back to this movie very often, is because Ann Darrow is so insufferable.
Would you say, I'll admit, she's had better roles. She has had better roles. The original House of Wax, or Mystery of the Wax Museum, and you know what, the movie she did prior, The Most Dangerous Game, was a better film she was in.
Haven't seen any other movie that she's been in aside from King Kong, so I can't really relate. But from what I've seen, she's just a bad actress. Con number 3 is this movie I don't think is paced very well. The first act is kind of slow, but it's barely tolerable because it's building up tension and it's building up suspense for the reveal of Skull Island. But I just feel like it goes on a little too long. All the stuff on the island is stellar. That's very cinematically paced. It's slow when it needs to be, and it's quick when it needs to be. It's perfect.
It's Jaws.
And the third act speeds up to Mach 5 like nobody's business. It's only the last half hour of the film or so, but god damn does it fly by in like 10 to 15 minutes, it feels like. So this movie is not paced all that well, in my opinion. That's why I just stick with the stuff on the island. I barely tolerate the first act, but whenever a couple times when I watched this movie, I just turned it off once Kong was gassed. Because I was like, I know what goes on, and I'm not interested in the rest. I'm done.
Well, it's funny, too, because like a lot of people say that the whole third act is kind of pointless. It's kind of like Lost World, where why don't you just knock him out and fucking leave? And that's the end. But no.
Con number, what is that? 3 or 4? 1, 2, 3. Con number...
They shouldn't be called cons. They should be called Kongs.
Okay, Kong number 4 is why does Kong have to die? One of my aunts told me why she does not like both the original, but especially the 05 version, is because Kong is treated... She's a big animal lover. And one thing that she doesn't really agree with is euthanization for animals, unless the animal attacked or killed some other person. Like, she does agree with putting down dogs that kill like a little kid or a baby. I agree with that too. But Kong is literally treated like he's forcibly taken out of his home, forced to be a show animal for the humans in captivity. And when he gets loose, because he gets spooked, the first reaction is just to gun him down and kill him.
Well, I'm going to counter your argument there about, if an animal kills people, it has the right to die. It's like humans, murder equals death penalty, I guess. Kong killed people when he was pissed off. He ate one guy. He tossed a girl to her death. He killed probably 20 people in that goddamn train.
True.
And he killed a couple of pilots. Now, I'm going to also counter it with a quote that is pretty much the rule of law, and it's for King Kong Lives, when Linda Hamilton says, well, Kong, you've killed now. Now they won't stop to kill you. That's just how it is.
That is true, yes, but and it's more prevalent in King Kong '05, so it's kind of excusable here. But I really feel like Kong's death is kind of mean spirited at the very end.
I do agree with that because that's one of the biggest flaws I had with '05 is that he should have killed more people in New York out of anger. But he doesn't. The idea Jackson had was we wanted him to be like a scared animal at a circus, because apparently they looked up research. There was like a famous video of a circus elephant who escaped and was like just running in a panic in the streets and somewhere in the States. So the cops just shot him down with shotguns, and he didn't even kill anybody. The poor thing was just scared out of his goddamn mind. So that's kind of what they were going for. But yeah, it's like there were some deaths. I mean, he did kind of kill people, but it was kind of accidental. It wasn't intentional, like the original, like in '76. Like those two, like the other Kong movies, he intentionally murdered people.
Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We're still talking about Kong 33 and only in the first episode. But yeah, just I wish Kong didn't really die, but it not so much in later films, but it's still here. But I understand why they included it because, you know, it's for the story, of course, but also this establishes this is the blueprint for the 50s giant monster trope, where the monster goes on a rampage throughout the city and we have to kill it at the very end. It's very prototypical and it's very classic, but still, Kong's death feels a little too mean-spirited, but whatever.
I like to point this out. Whenever a monster dies in a movie at the end and you're supposed to feel sorry, it's like you look at Guanji and you're like, did Guanji get King Kong'd? It's like when a famous character gets killed unexpectedly. It's like, did Gandalf get Boba Fetted?
And the last con that I have, admittedly, like Kong dying is kind of like a nitpick, and this one is also a nitpick. All the missing scenes, like why couldn't you just left the movie alone? Especially with the spider pit scene, that would have been a great addition. And I know this was storyboarded, but Kong fighting the 3 Triceratops in a tar pit would have been a great scene.
To those, for one, the 2 reasons why the spider pit was cut. One, apparently they showed it to test screenings and it was too shocking. It was like The Exorcist of its time. People running out of the theater terrified. But Cooper said it was also because it did stop the story, because you don't really give a fuck about these guys. You give a fuck about the 2 heroes. So who cares? Like, even just the gravity of falling from that height would kill them. But also with the Triceratops scene, that is a scene that has been constantly trying to be pushed into a Kong film. Even the Legend of King Kong tried to do it when they tried to replace that with the T-Rex, but that never fell through. It's like, this is the one scene that would be great to see in a movie.
I feel like Kong 05 may have paid an homage to that by having Kong fight 3 V-Rexes instead of just 1.
Yeah, I mean, but then also you think about this. I mean, that's like fighting 3 alligators. Kong fighting 3 Triceratops is like trying to wrestle 3 rhinos. You know, either the weight's going to kill you or their fucking deadly horns are going to kill him. So it gives him more of a challenge in a way. That's like putting him up against 3 Stegosauruses. Although, to be fair, that would be freaking awesome.
But yeah, those are just my 2 nitpicks. Really, my biggest problem is the pacing, Jack and Anne. The Kong's death and the missing scenes are kind of nitpicks, but any other Kongs that you have for this film?
No, that's really about it. I mean, there's not really much more. I mean, I've kind of pretty much summed up how I feel about it. I'm against the whole thing of you saying, "Oh, Kong dying is stupid." Well, then it beats the whole point of the story. Then it pretty much gets rid of the whole point of the story.
True. Yes.
The message and metaphor of the story is there's no jungle more deadly than civilization, and that humans, whatever they find, are destined to destroy what they find.
True. Also, yes, I agree with that. But my main issue is that Kong's death feels a little mean-spirited. But again, that's just to the point of the story. So that's just me. So what are your final thoughts on the original King Kong?
Well, having seen it for the 20th thousandth time, much like the film being an old film from the 30s, it never gets old. It never gets old despite being made we're coming up on almost 90 years in 2023.
Oh.
90 years, it never gets old. I still love it. I put it equal value to 76. Just an inspirational film. Great music, sound, animation. Like, I don't know where I would be without this film because I've been inspired by it by as many others have. And you see just the impact and everything. It just brought so much, maybe too much to cinema in just in the perfect package at the right time. 10 out of 10, can't get enough of it.
My final thoughts on the original King Kong are as follows. I appreciate this film for what it is. I don't think it's a bad movie. It's a very important film to the world of cinema. And since this is Super Kaiju Binge, of course, it's a very important step. Of course, it's the first step in the Kaiju genre. Now, granted, yes, it's very difficult to determine what was the very first giant monster movie. Many people will say it's The Lost World from 1925.
I was going to say with the Brontosaurus in London.
Now, that may be true. There are also many people that say that it's this film, and I kind of tend to be one of those who agree with that. So it being the very first monster movie, I don't go along with the phrase of, oh, the first one's the best, everything else is inferior. No, I do not agree with that statement anymore. I not even just for the original King Kong, and not even just in the world of kaiju movies, I don't think that the original is the best, and I don't think that everything else is inferior. This is a great...
Jurassic Park. That is always going to be the best film.
Debatably.
Jaws.
That one's without a doubt. That's different. This is a great blueprint for future movies to take advantage of and make into their own thing. But looking at the blueprint as its own thing, it's a good film, but it's not a great film, in my opinion. There are things to like, but there are things that really hold this film back for me. I appreciate this film for what it is, and of course, I do acknowledge its existence, and without this movie, I wouldn't have Godzilla, or I wouldn't have Avatar, I wouldn't have James Cameron or Steven Spielberg. I wouldn't have a lot of shit that I take for granted nowadays if not for this movie. But still, that being said, I respect it, but I don't love it. Which is why I will be giving the original King Kong from 1933 a 6 out of 10. Sorry, but I'm not sorry. So, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the very first episode of Super Kaiju Binge. We got a whole shit ton more to go. And since I'm on vacation for the next few days, I'll be getting a lot more than just 2 videos a week. So look forward in a couple of days when me and Kaiju Network talk about the bastard sequel to this movie. Damn it!
Oh, boy.
Son of Kong from 1933. Jackie Boy, got anything to plug?
Just tune in Friday. Every Friday in October, I will be reviewing all the Universal Studios monsters. This week, it will be the original Mummy from 1932. Other than that, check out my King Kong reviews. I will be having 2 new episodes in November, December. And on top of that, check out my BigJackFilms reviews. I just do crazy reviews mixed with fan films and occasionally bonking a waifu. So, beauty tames the beast in more ways than one. Alright, yeah, check me out. Subscribe to this guy. This guy's awesome. Subscribe to Nick.
Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And as always, go out and if you come across a giant monkey in an undiscovered island, Leave him alone. He doesn't want to be taken out of his home.